The service kitchen reeked of rot mixed with despair. Liam, just 8 years old, held a rusty fork in his trembling hands, staring at the plate of spoiled leftovers in front of him. Beside him, 6-year-old Sophie tried to hold back her tears as flies circled over blackened potato peels and pieces of meat tinged with green mold. From the main hall, just a few yards away, came crystal-clear laughter and the clinking of expensive champagne flutes. It was Christmas Eve 2024, and while 40 elite guests celebrated under twinkling lights and golden garlands, 2 innocent children were being forced to eat garbage. Maria Sanchez, the 52-year-old housekeeper, watched everything from her post by the door, her cell phone hidden in a shaky palm. She had worked in this mansion for over 10 years, since back when Mr. Davies's first wife was still alive and filled these halls with genuine love. Now, under the command of the new lady of the house, Veronica, everything had transformed into a silent, calculated nightmare. Maria knew that if anyone discovered she was documenting this, she would be fired immediately, perhaps even sued. But when Sophie lifted her tear-filled, desperate eyes in her direction, pleading for help without making a sound, Maria understood that some things were more important than her own job. She was just a humble housekeeper. At 52, a widow and mother to an adult son, she had worked in this 3-story mansion for over a decade. That Christmas, she witnessed something that shook her to her core. 2 innocent children being forced to eat rotten garbage while their stepmother celebrated with Dom Prignon in the next room. Doctors would later say the children were malnourished, anemic, and on the verge of irreversible complications. Their father, Richard Davies, a powerful real estate billionaire, had no idea of the hell unfolding under his own luxurious roof while he closed million-dollar deals on the other side of the world. But it was this housekeeper who did something in secret. Without asking for permission, without expecting recognition or reward, she risked her job, her financial security, her own well-being. What she kept hidden for months in a secret folder on her old cell phone brought the millionaire father to his knees when he finally found out. She had documented every abuse, every hidden tear, every night of hunger while leftovers from lavish parties were thrown in the trash. And when the world discovered the truth on that Christmas night, absolutely everything changed forever. This is the true story of how courage doesn't need a fancy last name or a hefty bank account. Just a heart that refuses to stay silent in the face of injustice. It's about how sometimes the real heroes wear simple uniforms and have hands calloused from hard work. Before we continue with this story that will break your heart and then restore your faith in humanity, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Oh, and be sure to comment below where you're watching from. We love knowing we have people from all over the country and the world following these stories that need to be told. The smell of roast turkey wafting from the main hall was a cruel contrast to the sour odor of the scraps on the children's plates. The lights from the 20-foot Christmas tree blinked in shades of gold and red through the half-open kitchen door, intermittently illuminating the pale faces of Liam and Sophie. Out there, the Christmas decorations had cost over $10,000, imported garlands, Swarovski crystal ornaments, rare white flowers flown in specially from Holland. Meanwhile, in the service kitchen, 2 children wore shabby, patched-up clothes, sitting on old wooden stools that creaked with every movement. What would you do if you saw 2 children being forced to eat garbage while the person responsible for protecting them celebrated in absolute luxury just a few feet away? This was the question hammering in Maria's head as her fingers trembled over the record button on her phone. She had asked herself this same question dozens of times over the past 6 months, ever since the first signs of abuse began to appear. Every time she hesitated, she thought of her own son, now a successful lawyer, and imagined how she would feel if he had gone through that. The answer was always the same. She would never forgive anyone who knew and did nothing. Not everyone who wears Italian designer clothes and diamond jewelry has a clean heart. Not everyone who scrubs the floors is the one who truly needs a moral cleansing. Maria had learned this lesson in the most painful way possible over those hellish months. Veronica Monroe, the children's stepmother, was the perfect picture of elegance and sophistication in the eyes of society, a former executive assistant who had won the heart of the billionaire widower, always impeccably dressed, always with a polite smile and the posture of a magazine model. But when the doors closed and the witnesses disappeared, that woman transformed into something monstrous. In that 12-bedroom mansion in the city's most exclusive gated community, where every square foot was worth more than an entire apartment in an ordinary neighborhood, 2 innocent children were living a silent hell. Richard traveled constantly on international business, blindly trusting the wife who presented false reports about his children's problematic behavior. Veronica had built a perfect narrative. The children were traumatized by their mother's death, rebellious, in need of firm discipline. And Richard, consumed by the guilt of being absent and the desire for his new marriage to work, believed every word. When luxury hides the rot, only the eyes of those who clean can see the true filth. Maria muttered these words to herself as she recorded a few more seconds of the devastating scene. Sophie finally broke down in silent sobs, and Liam, his narrow shoulders shaking, pulled his little sister into a protective hug. Neither of them touched the spoiled food. They knew they would get sick again, as had happened so many times before. And as Maria witnessed this with tears streaming down her own face, the sound of a new bottle of champagne being popped erupted from the next room, followed by applause and more laughter from the elite, who had no idea of the horror happening just yards away. 6 months before that devastating Christmas Eve, the Davies mansion had been the setting for a completely different celebration. It was May 2024, and Richard Davies, at 45, was finally allowing himself to feel hope again after 2 years submerged in grief over the death of his first wife, Helen. Veronica Munro had arrived at the mansion for the first time on that sunny Saturday, in an elegant navy blue dress and a smile that seemed to light up every room she entered. Maria remembered that afternoon perfectly. She was finishing her shift when she saw Mr. Davies introduce his new girlfriend to the children in the garden, all of them surrounded by the rose bushes Helen had planted with such care. Liam and Sophie had greeted Veronica with the natural shyness of children still wounded by loss. Liam was just 7.5 at the time, a thin boy with tousled brown hair and eyes just like his late mother's. Sophie had barely turned 5, still calling for her mother during nightmares and sleeping with a framed photo she kept on her nightstand. Veronica had knelt before them at that first meeting, holding their little hands with a practiced delicacy, promising she would never try to replace their mommy, only wanting to care for them and give them love. Maria watched the scene from the kitchen window and felt an inexplicable tightness in her chest. Something about that too-perfect smile bothered her. Maria Sanchez knew that mansion better than her own modest home where she lived with her son. She had started working there 10 years earlier, hired by Helen herself when she was pregnant with Sophie. Helen had been a kind employer, one who insisted Maria eat lunch at the family table, who asked about her son studying law, who doubled her salary at Christmas without being asked. When Helen passed away suddenly from a heart attack at 38, or at least, that's what they said, Maria cried as much as the children. She stayed at the mansion for Richard and the children, becoming a constant, steady presence as that family reorganized itself amidst the pain. Richard and Veronica's wedding took place just 4 months after that first meeting, a discreet but luxurious ceremony in September 2024. Veronica Munro, at 38, had an impressive resume executive assistant at a multinational corporation, an MBA in business administration, fluent in 3 languages, with the looks of a magazine model. She had won Richard over during a business meeting where she worked, offering not just professional efficiency, but also emotional understanding to a man shattered by grief. To all appearances, it was the happy ending Richard and the children deserved. To Maria, who watched everything with the experienced eyes of someone who had worked in other people's homes for decades, it was the beginning of something disturbing. The 3-story mansion sat on a 2,000 square meter plot in the Belle Rive community, the most exclusive in the city. 12 ensuite bedrooms, a climate-controlled wine cellar with wines that cost more than economy cars, a gourmet kitchen with imported appliances, a garden with a heated pool, a private spa, and a tennis court. Richard worked in high-end real estate, developing luxury condominiums that sold apartments for millions. His net worth was estimated at over $10 million, built through hard work over 20 years. All of it was to ensure a brilliant future for his children, or so he believed. The first time Maria realized something was wrong was 3 weeks after the wedding. Richard had traveled to Chicago to inspect a new development, a planned 5-day absence. Maria arrived for her morning shift and found Liam in the kitchen at 6 in the morning cleaning the floor with a rag and bucket. "Miss Veronica said I need to learn responsibility," the boy explained in a low voice, his hands red from scrubbing. There was no breakfast prepared for the children, but Veronica herself was sipping an organic smoothie and eating imported toast on the veranda. Maria felt her stomach churn but said nothing at that moment. After all, many parents believe in teaching responsibility through chores. But the chores quickly turned into punishments. Sophie would forget to put away her toys and was sent to bed without dinner. Liam talked back and was locked in his room for hours. Veronica implemented increasingly strict rules whenever Richard was away, and he traveled constantly, sometimes 15 days a month. The mansion, once filled with childish laughter and loving chaos, became silent and tense. The children walked on tiptoe, spoke in whispers, and avoided bumping into anything. Maria began to notice bruises that Veronica explained away as falls during playtime or children are just clumsy. Carmen, the 60-year-old cook who worked 3 times a week, also started to notice. She would prepare delicious meals that Veronica served to herself and saved for Richard, while the children received only the bare minimum unsalted rice, small pieces of chicken, no dessert. "They're above their ideal weight," Veronica would justify, even though both children were visibly thinner. When Carmen dared to question her, she was harshly reprimanded and threatened with dismissal. The cook and Maria began to exchange worried glances, but both depended on those jobs: Maria to pay for her diabetes treatment, Carmen to help her unemployed daughter with 3 grandchildren. Richard Davies was in essence a good man blinded by his own absence and masterful manipulation. Tall, with graying hair at the temples, always dressed in impeccable suits, he worked 16 hours a day building the empire he believed would secure his children's future. When he was home, Veronica staged perfection, well-behaved children, a spotless house, romantic dinners. She carefully edited what he saw, controlled when and how he interacted with Liam and Sophie. Little by little, she planted poisonous seeds. "They've been difficult since I married you, perhaps resentful of my presence." Or, "The psychologist said their rebellious behavior is a normal phase of grief. We need firm discipline." The true nature of Veronica Monroe was something she hid under layers of sophistication and calculated manipulation. She didn't love Richard. She loved his assets, his status, his power. She didn't want to be a stepmother. She wanted to eliminate any emotional connection between the father and his children, to gain total control over the fortune. Her motivations were purely financial. She had already discreetly investigated his assets, consulted with lawyers about inheritances, and planned how to remove the children from the equation without raising suspicion. To her, Liam and Sophie were inconvenient obstacles that needed to be neutralized, preferably by sending them to distant boarding schools, or better yet, convincing Richard that they were not suited for the life he deserved. It was 3 in the morning on a cold Tuesday in June when Maria heard the muffled sobs coming from the service bathroom. She had forgotten her lunchbox in the mansion's refrigerator and had come back to get it, using the key she was allowed to use for emergencies. The house was in absolute silence, only the hum of the central air conditioning cutting through the quiet. Maria followed the sound of crying and found the door ajar, a sliver of yellowish light escaping into the dark hallway. When she pushed the door open slowly, her heart practically stopped when she saw Sophie huddled on the cold ceramic floor, hugging her own legs. The 6-year-old girl lifted her red, swollen eyes, and Maria saw the pure terror etched on that little face. "Auntie Maria," Sophie whispered in a voice hoarse from crying. "Don't tell Daddy, please don't tell." Her little hands were shaking violently, and it was only when Maria knelt beside her that she noticed the marks. There were red and purple welts on the child's thin legs, the unmistakable marks of a belt. Maria felt a wave of nausea rise in her throat as she opened her arms, and Sophie threw herself against her, clinging as if she would drown without that embrace. "Who did this to you, my angel?" Maria asked in a trembling voice, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. Sophie sobbed harder, her small body shaking uncontrollably in the housekeeper's arms. "Miss Veronica said I was very naughty because I spilled juice on the living room rug," the girl explained between sniffles. "She said I did it on purpose to ruin the nice things in the house, that I'm a spoiled and badly behaved child." The words tumbled out, laden with a pain no child should ever know. But what broke Maria's heart the most was what came next. Sophie grabbed the housekeeper's arm with a surprising strength for someone so small and fragile. "You can't tell Daddy, Auntie Maria. Promise you won't tell." The girl's eyes were wide with genuine fear. "Veronica said that if Daddy finds out we're bad, he'll send us away to an orphanage." Sophie swallowed hard, trembling. "She said Mommy died because we were too much work, that we made her sick with all the stress, and that if Daddy finds out how bad we really are, he might die too." Maria felt fury erupt in her chest, but she forced herself to keep her voice calm and comforting. She wiped the tears from Sophie's face with the sleeve of her own uniform and held the girl's little face gently. "Listen to me, my love. None of that is true. Do you hear me? None of it." Maria spoke slowly, making sure every word sank in. "You are not bad. You did not make your mummy sick, and your daddy will never ever send you away because he loves you more than anything in the world." But even as she spoke, Maria knew she had to do more than just console. She had to act, and act fast. That morning, sitting on the cold floor of that service bathroom while cradling a traumatized child until she fell asleep from exhaustion, Maria Sanchez made the decision that would change everything. She was torn between calling Mr. Davies immediately, Child Protective Services, the police, or gathering concrete proof first. She knew stories of women like Veronica, perfect manipulators who knew how to cry at the right time, lie convincingly, and turn any situation to their advantage. The word of a humble housekeeper against that of a wealthy, respectable, and well-connected socialite. Maria knew how that would end, so she decided to document everything secretly. Her son, Marcus, a 28-year-old junior lawyer, had given her a newer phone a few months earlier, insisting she needed to have WhatsApp to communicate better. Maria barely knew how to use all its functions, but Marcus had taught her how to record videos and take photos. That morning, with Sophie finally sleeping soundly in her arms, Maria took careful pictures of the belt marks on the child's legs. Her hands were shaking so much she had to try 3 times to get clear images, but she managed. Carrying Sophie back to her room without waking anyone was a delicate and agonizing operation. Maria climbed the stairs with the girl in her arms, each step creaking softly under the weight. The second-floor hallway was dark. The door to the master bedroom where Veronica and Richard slept was closed. He had returned from his trip earlier that afternoon. Maria placed Sophie in her bed next to Liam, who was fast asleep, and covered them both with the thin blanket that was all Veronica allowed them to use, even with the air conditioning on full blast. Before leaving, Maria kissed each child's forehead and made a silent promise. "I will save you." But the obstacles Maria would face were greater than she imagined at that moment. In the following days, she discovered that Veronica had installed security cameras for safety throughout the house, except, conveniently, in the children's rooms, the service bathroom, and a few strategic corners where the abuse took place. The stepmother was too smart to leave obvious evidence. Furthermore, Veronica kept Richard's cell phone practically under her control, always helping to filter calls and messages, so he isn't bothered with trivial things while he's working. Maria tried to call Richard directly twice the following week, but on both occasions Veronica answered. "Oh, Maria, so glad you called. I was just about to talk to you about reorganizing the cleaning supplies," she said the first time, in a cheerful, professional tone that was completely at odds with the monster Maria knew she was. When Maria insisted she needed to speak with Mr. Davies personally, Veronica's voice turned icy. "He's in a very important meeting that cannot be interrupted. Any matter concerning the house, you resolve with me. I'm the one who manages everything now." The message was clear. Don't try to go around me. As October arrived and Christmas loomed on the horizon, the abuse not only continued, but intensified in a frightening way. Veronica began waking the children at 5 in the morning every day, even on weekends, so they could learn the value of hard work. Liam and Sophie were forced to clean their own rooms, the bathroom they used, and also help with chores in the kitchen, all before going to school. Maria would arrive for her 7 o'clock shift to find the children exhausted, with dark circles under their eyes, dragging themselves through the halls like little ghosts. Meanwhile, Veronica was planning her grand Christmas charity gala for underprivileged children, an event that would be a highlight in the society columns. The hypocrisy of the situation made Maria physically ill. She watched Veronica parade through the house with event planners, tasting imported French pastries, choosing $5,000 floral arrangements, while upstairs, the children were punished with denied meals for invented infractions. "These children are going to learn that in this life everything must be earned," Veronica declared one afternoon to the friends who had come for tea, her melodic voice carrying venom disguised as educational wisdom. "Richard spoiled them too much after their mother died. I am simply correcting his mistakes." The friends nodded in agreement, impressed with the dedication of the new mommy. Maria continued to meticulously document everything with her cell phone. She recorded conversations where Veronica humiliated the children, photographed the minimal plates of food they were served, and filmed them being forced to clean already impeccable areas. Her phone became an archive of horror, folder after folder of evidence growing by the day. She hid the device at her waist under her uniform, keeping it on silent mode, recording hours of audio. At night, in her simple little room at home, Maria would cry watching the videos, reinforcing her determination to see this through to the end. But then came the shocking discovery that raised the stakes, the finding that transformed child abuse into something potentially far more sinister. It was a November afternoon, and Veronica was at the spa getting her nails done, leaving her work phone charging in the kitchen outlet. Maria was cleaning the cabinets when the device buzzed with a message. She didn't intend to look, it wasn't in her nature, but the screen lit up showing a preview of the message, and the contact name made her freeze. Dr. Silverstone, estate lawyer. The beginning of the message was visible. "Documentation for the will alteration is in progress. Regarding the children, as we discussed." Maria's heart hammered against her ribs. With trembling hands and constantly glancing at the door, she picked up the phone and read the entire conversation. What she saw made her blood run cold. Messages exchanged over weeks detailed a plan to completely remove Liam and Sophie from Richard's inheritance. But it was worse than that. There were veiled references to speeding up the process. Neglected children are prone to accidents, and committing them to a psychiatric institution for violent behavior might be more efficient. Veronica and the lawyer were conspiring not only to steal the children's inheritance, but possibly to eliminate them from Richard's life entirely, in a permanent and devastating way. Maria photographed every message with her own phone, her hands shaking so badly she had to retake several pictures until they were legible. She had 15 minutes before Veronica returned from the spa. 15 minutes to record the most important evidence she had so far, proof of premeditation, of conspiracy, of truly sinister intentions. When she was done, Maria placed the phone back exactly as it was, checked 3 times that she had left no trace, and went back to cleaning the cabinets with mechanical movements, while her mind raced, trying to process what she had discovered. This was much bigger than she thought. The external obstacles multiplied like poisonous weeds. The following week, Carmen, the cook who also suspected the abuse, was summarily fired. "We're making budget cuts," Veronica announced with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Besides, I've decided I'm going to cook more for the family. It's important to have that personal touch." Maria understood the message. Witnesses were being eliminated. She was now completely alone as the internal observer of this nightmare. Joseph, the driver, kept his head down, terrified of losing the job that supported his sick wife. The community's security guard had, Maria discovered, been bribed by Veronica not to report minor irregularities. And Richard remained absent, increasingly consumed by a billion-dollar project in Dubai that required long and frequent trips. Veronica encouraged these absences, whispering poisonous words during their nightly calls. "Honey, don't worry about the children. I'll take care of everything here. You focus on securing our future." She sent edited photos of Liam and Sophie looking happy, always taken during the rare moments Richard was home and the children were forced to feign normality. When he video called from his trips, Veronica would strategically position the children, control what they said, and interrupt if they started to say anything inappropriate. Richard saw what she wanted him to see, nothing more. Maria faced her own internal conflicts that gnawed at her from the inside. She depended on that job not just for basic expenses, but to pay for her diabetes treatment, a condition that was worsening with the stress. The doctor's appointments, the insulin, the regular tests, it all depended on the salary she received from the Davies mansion. If she were fired or worse, sued for invasion of privacy, for recording without permission, she would lose everything. At 52, with no references after being kicked out of a millionaire's house, who would hire her? How would she survive? How could she help her son if she herself was broke and unemployed? But the guilt was worse than the fear. Maria woke up every morning from nightmares where she saw Sophie and Liam begging for help while she stood paralyzed, unable to move. She thought of her own late mother, who always used to say, "Maria, there are situations in life where doing nothing is the same as being an accomplice." Every night, kneeling before the small altar in her room, Maria prayed for guidance, for strength, for courage. She knew she had proof now, months of videos, photos, audio clips, screenshots of incriminating messages. But she also knew that women like Veronica had expensive lawyers, powerful connections, and the ability to distort any narrative. Maria tried the official channels anonymously, calling Child Protective Services from a payphone. She explained the situation, omitting names at first, testing the waters. The response was disheartening. "Ma'am, without concrete proof and a formal identification of the complainant, we cannot act against a high-profile family. Unfounded accusations can result in lawsuits." Maria mentioned she had videos. "Filmed with the knowledge and consent of the parties? No? Then they may be inadmissible depending on the legal context." The system, Maria discovered bitterly, protected the wealthy until the weight of the evidence was absolutely irrefutable. She needed more. She needed the perfect smoking gun. So Maria devised her final strategy. Wait until Christmas, when Richard had promised to be home for a whole week, a rare occurrence for him. Veronica was planning her lavish charity gala for December 24th, Christmas Eve, inviting the city's entire elite. Maria saw the opportunity. The stepmother would be under maximum pressure to maintain a perfect facade, which meant she would likely intensify the abuse to keep the children under control and invisible during the event. And Richard was due to return from Dubai on the 24th, theoretically in time for the party. Maria would use her own savings to buy a better phone with a high-definition camera and capture the definitive evidence on the most important night of the year. The revelation came in a completely unexpected way. On a grey morning in early December, Maria was cleaning Richard's office on the 3rd floor, a room Veronica rarely frequented, considering it boring male territory. The window was slightly ajar, and voices drifted up from the garden below, Veronica on the phone thinking she was completely alone and unwatched. "Yes, Dr. Costello, I understand your concern." Her melodious voice rose on the cold morning air. "But as you yourself said at the time, Helen's death certificate was filed as cardiac complications. No one ever questioned it, and no one ever will." Maria felt every muscle in her body tense, and she slowly moved closer to the window. "You did your job perfectly back then," Veronica continued, her voice carrying a disturbing tone of intimacy. "The progressive doses of digitalis you administered were undetectable in routine tests, just as you promised. Helen simply fell asleep during her hospital stay." Maria had to grab the edge of the desk to keep from stumbling. Digitalis, she had watched enough crime shows to know it was a poison that mimicked a heart attack. Helen had not died of natural causes. She had been murdered slowly and methodically by someone inside the very hospital that was supposed to save her. "No, you don't need to worry," Veronica said with a cold little laugh that made Maria's blood freeze. "Richard never suspected a thing. He was so consumed with work and the children that he barely visited his wife in the hospital, remember? It was easy." A pause as she listened to the person on the other end. "And yes, The extra payment we agreed on is guaranteed, but you need to keep quiet, Dr. Costello. What we did 2 years ago needs to stay buried along with Helen. Another pause. Oh, and about the new situation I mentioned. Yes, I'm still considering the options for the children. Do you still have access to those psychiatric medications you mentioned? Maria knew she had to record this, but her phone was in her uniform pocket, and she would have to move, risking making a noise. With extremely slow and careful movements, she managed to pull out the device, activate the audio recording, and position it on the windowsill. Her heart was beating so loudly, she feared Veronica could hear it from below. The conversation continued for another 5 devastating minutes, with Veronica discussing details of how the Helen solution could be adapted if necessary to remove obstacles permanently. When she finally hung up, Maria held in her hands evidence of premeditated murder, ongoing conspiracy, and a direct threat to the children. Maria's hands were shaking so much she almost dropped the phone as she stopped the recording. Helen, that sweet woman who had treated her like family, who had planted roses in the garden and sang lullabies to her children, had been murdered. Poisoned little by little by a corrupt doctor at the behest of the executive assistant who planned to steal her place. And now that same murderer had complete custody of Helen's children, innocent kids who were the last living traces of the woman she had killed. The enormity of it, the absolute horror of the situation, made Maria sink heavily into the leather office chair, fighting a wave of nausea. But there was no time to collapse. Veronica was escalating her operation, and the grand Christmas charity gala would be the perfect stage for her final performance as a devoted wife and stepmother. Maria looked at the calendar on the wall. Exactly 20 days until Christmas. 20 days to gather every possible piece of evidence, to build a case so solid that not even the best lawyer in the world could defend Veronica. 20 days to save Liam and Sophie not just from abuse, but potentially from being the next victims of a murderer who had already killed once and clearly wouldn't hesitate to kill again. Maria knew she couldn't do this alone anymore. That night, sitting at the small kitchen table in her modest home, she finally told her son everything. Marcus, the 28-year-old junior lawyer, listened in growing silence as his mother played audio clips, showed him videos and displayed screenshots of messages. When she got to the recording of the conversation about Helen's murder, Marcus turned pale. "Mom, this is conspiracy to commit murder. This is prime criminal evidence." He ran his hands through his hair, processing. But it was recorded without consent, which complicates its admissibility in court. We need independent corroboration. Marcus worked all night analyzing the material Maria had collected over the months. He created a detailed timeline of the abuse, catalogued each piece of evidence by date and type, and identified what would be admissible in court and what needed corroboration. "The Christmas video will be crucial," he explained to his mother in the early hours of the morning. "If you can get an undeniable visual of the abuse in the father's presence with elite witnesses there, it completely shatters Veronica's defense. And once the child abuse investigation is officially open, we can introduce the other evidence, including the recording about Helena as part of a pattern of criminal behavior." An unexpected alliance came from Joseph, the 55-year-old driver who had worked for the family for 8 years. One afternoon, he pulled Maria aside in the garage, looked around to make sure they were alone, and whispered, "I know what you're doing. I know you're documenting." Maria felt panic explode, but Joseph held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm on your side. I have things I've seen too, things she made me be a part of against my will." He told her about the times he was forced to take the children to appointments with the psychologist who produced false reports, about conversations he overheard Veronica having in the car, thinking he wasn't paying attention. "When the time comes, I'll testify. Those kids don't deserve this." But not all were allies. Dr. Beatrice Crane, the private psychologist Veronica had hired to treat the children's grief trauma, was completely complicit. Maria discovered, through Veronica's own carelessness, that the psychologist was being paid exorbitant amounts to produce reports diagnosing Liam and Sophie with oppositional defiant disorder, aggressive tendencies, and the need for institutionalization for their own good. The reports were complete lies. The children were docile, traumatized, and frightened, but never aggressive. It was all part of the plan to convince Richard that his children were too problematic and needed to be sent away, preferably to some expensive psychiatric clinic where Veronica would have total control. Christmas Eve 2024 dawned with a clear sky and a mild temperature, the kind of perfect day that seemed to mock the horror that would unfold before it ended. The Davies mansion was transformed into a fairy tale scene. Decorators had worked for 3 days, installing $40,000 worth of lights, garlands imported from Switzerland, and floral arrangements that needed to be refrigerated every 2 hours. A 20-foot Christmas tree dominated the main hall, covered in Swarovski crystal ornaments that reflected the light in 1,000 directions. Everything was impeccable, luxurious, perfect. Everything except what was happening behind the scenes, far from the eyes of the 40 elite guests who would arrive at 8 o'clock. Maria had arrived at 6 in the morning, 3 hours before her normal time, with the new phone hidden at her waist. Her son Marcus had bought a model with a high-definition camera and the capacity to record for hours continuously. "Position it somewhere with a view of where you think it will happen," he had instructed. "And Mom, be careful. If she finds out before the right moment, you could be in real danger." Maria had hugged her son too tightly, unable to say that she already knew the risks, that she had already made her peace with them, that some things are worth more than one's own safety. Saving Liam and Sophie was one of those things. At 9 in the morning, Maria witnessed Veronica take the children to the service kitchen, away from the hustle of the final preparations. What happened there made Maria have to bite her own tongue to keep from screaming. Veronica opened the large trash can, where scraps from the party prep had been discarded, potato peels already turning brown, dubious-looking pieces of meat, vegetable scraps beginning to rot. "You're going to eat this, and stay here quietly until I come for you," Veronica said in a sweet voice that contrasted horribly with her words. "If you make a sound, if you try to leave, if you ruin my party in any way, I swear that tomorrow morning you'll be on your way to an orphanage, and you will never see your father again." Liam, thin and pale, pulled Sophie behind him in a protective gesture that was devastatingly mature for his 8 years. "But Miss Veronica, this food is spoiled. We'll get sick again like last time." His voice trembled, but he tried to be brave. Veronica bent down until she was at his eye level, and the smile she gave was pure evil. "You should have thought of that before being such problematic and difficult children. Your father is coming home today, and he'll finally agree to send you away when I show him the psychologist's reports. But for now, eat your garbage and stay invisible. It's what you deserve." Maria had her phone hidden on a high shelf in the service kitchen, a perfect angle, recording every second, every poisonous word, every expression of terror on the children's faces, every detail of the plate of rotten leftovers. She remained hidden in the adjacent hallway, tears streaming silently down her face, forcing herself not to intervene yet. Not yet. She needed Richard to see it with his own eyes, not just in recordings that he could question or that lawyers could claim were edited. She needed the absolute, undeniable proof, witnessed personally by the children's father. The hours dragged on in agony. Guests began to arrive at 8 o'clock: businessmen, local politicians, social media influencers, the city's entire elite dressed in designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Veronica was radiant in a $15,000 red dress, circulating among the guests, accepting compliments on the stunning decor and the charity work she was doing for needy children. Waiters served French champagne and elaborate canapes. A children's choir from a local orphanage, cruel irony, sang Christmas carols in the garden. Everything was perfect. Veronica's performance was flawless. No one imagined the horror hidden just a few yards away. Richard was late. His flight from Dubai had been rescheduled, and he would only arrive at 10 o'clock, 2 hours later than planned. Maria knew this because she had overheard Veronica on the phone, annoyed but adjusting her plans. "It's okay, honey. The party is still beautiful. I'll see you when you get here." She hung up and muttered, "Perfect. More time to make sure those children stay locked up and quiet." Maria took advantage of a moment when Veronica was distracted with guests to slip into the service kitchen. What she saw broke her heart into a million pieces, Liam and Sophie huddled together in a corner, shivering from the cold. Veronica had turned off the heat in that area, with their plates untouched before them. Then, at 10:15, Maria saw the headlights of Richard's car illuminating the driveway. He had arrived 2 hours earlier than the new expected time. He had changed flights at the last minute. Maria's heart pounded. This was the moment. She ran to the garage through the back, intercepting Richard before he could enter through the main door where Veronica would see him. "Mr. Davies," she gasped, grabbing his arm. "Please, I know this is going to sound crazy, but give me 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes before you go into the party." Richard, tired from the 15-hour flight, confused, began to protest. Maria did something she had never done in 10 years of service. She took out her own phone and pressed play on the shortest, most devastating video she had. 6-year-old Sophie eating garbage while she cried. Richard's face went white as a sheet. "Where? When? What is this?" His voice came out strangled. Maria was crying openly now. "It's happening right now, Mr. Davies. At this very moment. Your children are in the service kitchen being forced to eat rotten leftovers while your wife celebrates with the city's elite just yards away." She showed him another 30 seconds, Veronica, threatening to send the children to an orphanage, Liam trying to protect Sophie. "And there's more, Mr. Davies, much more, months of abuse and worse things about Mrs. Helen." Her voice failed her, but Richard's eyes had already changed. The initial denial was giving way to something darker, a slow, horrifying understanding dawning. For 5 agonizing minutes, Maria didn't know what Richard would do. He stood there, staring at her phone, watching fragments of the videos she had quickly selected, months of evidence in devastating flashes. His face went through several stages: disbelief, confusion, horror, and finally, a fury so profound it made Maria take a step back. "Where are my children right now?" His voice was low, dangerous, too controlled. "The service kitchen, sir," Maria replied. "Take me there," he ordered. "And Maria, thank you. Thank you for having the courage when I was too blind to see." They walked through the back hallways, avoiding the main hall where the party continued in full swing, moving toward the confrontation that would change everything. Richard opened the door to the service kitchen and simply froze. His children, his babies, were huddled on the cold floor, dirty, too thin, shaking. In front of them were plates of visibly rotten scraps. Sophie saw her father first and let out a whimper that was part relief, part absolute terror. Liam tried to stand up quickly, attempting to hide his sister, his eyes wide with fear of his own father. Maria realized with horror, because Veronica had conditioned them to believe he would abandon them if he knew how bad they were. Richard fell to his knees right there, his expensive suit getting dirty on the kitchen floor, and opened his arms. "Liam, Sophie," his voice broke completely. "My children, my loves, what has she done to you?" And when the children saw there was no anger in his eyes, only pain and love, they ran into his arms and collapsed. Richard Davies held his children for long minutes there on the cold floor of that service kitchen, while from the main hall came laughter and festive Christmas music. Liam and Sophie clung to their father as if they would drown if they let go, and he murmured repeatedly, forgive me, Daddy was blind, but it's over now." Maria remained at the door, witnessing the devastating reunion, knowing the worst was yet to come. When Richard finally stood up with a child in each arm, even though they were too big for it, his face was a mask of iron determination. "Maria, call the police, now!" He walked directly into the main hall, still carrying his children, not caring about their appearance or his own. The silence that fell over the party when Richard entered was absolute and shocking. 40 elite guests dressed in their finest, champagne flutes suspended in mid-air, stared open-mouthed as their host held 2 visibly mistreated and dirty children. Veronica was in the center of the hall, laughing at a joke from an important businessman, when she turned and saw her husband. The color drained completely from her face. "Richard, honey, you're here. The children aren't supposed to..." She tried to approach with a desperate smile, but Richard held up a hand that stopped her in her tracks. "Don't you come near my children," he said in a voice so cold that several people around them took a step back. "Not ever again." "I want everyone here to see," Richard said, loud enough for every guest to hear, his voice echoing through the lavishly decorated hall. See what was happening in this house while my wife organized charity parties for the children. See my own children, hungry, dirty, terrified. He turned Liam and Sophie so everyone could see the torn clothes, the marks on their arms, the gaunt faces. Social media influencers who minutes before were posting photos of the wonderful charity gala were now filming in horror. A businesswoman known for her philanthropic work with children began to weep openly. This woman, Richard pointed at Veronica, has been systematically torturing my children for months, and I will make sure the entire world knows it. Veronica tried what had always worked: tears, manipulation, blame shifting. Richard, you don't understand. I was trying to discipline them. They're so difficult, the psychologist said. But her voice sounded too false, too desperate, and the guests had already seen enough evidence with their own eyes. So she switched tactics, trying anger. You dare to humiliate me in front of everyone, after everything I've done for you, for this house. That's when Maria entered the hall, holding her cell phone. Would you like me to show the videos, Mr. Davies? She asked clearly. Months of documentation of everything this woman has done? The panic that flashed across Veronica's face was a confession in itself. Sirens began to wail at the community's entrance. The police arrived in 4 squad cars. Maria had explained the gravity of the situation on the phone. 2 detectives entered the mansion, followed by social workers and an emergency medical team. Veronica was handcuffed right there, in the middle of her Christmas-decorated hall, under the horrified gazes of the guests who were witnessing the complete collapse of her perfect facade. This is absurd. I have rights. I will sue all of you, she screamed as she was led away, but her voice held no power anymore. The paramedics examined Liam and Sophie immediately. Severe malnutrition, anemia, signs of prolonged physical and psychological abuse. These children need to be hospitalized for observation and treatment, the doctor told Richard, who agreed instantly, going with them in the ambulance. The investigation that followed in the subsequent weeks was like opening Pandora's box. Maria's videos and audio recordings were handed over to the authorities and became central pieces of evidence. The recording about Helen and Dr. Costello led to the exhumation of Richard's first wife's body toxicology tests, confirmed levels of digitalis consistent with progressive poisoning. The doctor was arrested trying to flee to Mexico. Veronica was formally charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder, aggravated child abuse, fraud, criminal conspiracy, and a list of charges that would guarantee decades in prison. The complicit psychologist lost her professional license and also faced charges. The corrupt lawyer who planned to alter the will became a witness for the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. The case gained national attention when the social media influencers who were at the party began to expose what they had witnessed. Justice for Liam and Sophie became a trending topic. News programs covered the story extensively, always careful to protect the children's identities, but completely exposing Veronica's crimes. Maria became a national hero, the humble housekeeper who risked everything to save 2 children. Job offers, interviews, and even book deals came her way, but Maria refused anything involving publicity. I didn't do it for fame, she said simply. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Richard, deeply grateful and consumed by guilt, promoted Maria to house manager with a tripled salary, a full health plan that covered all her diabetes treatments, and a guaranteed private pension. Richard learned the most painful lesson of his life, that financial success and building an empire mean nothing if you're not present to protect who really matters. He drastically reduced his travel, began working primarily from home, and dedicated himself to rebuilding his relationship with Liam and Sophie through intensive family therapy. Maria learned that courage sometimes means risking absolutely everything: your job, your security, even your own life, for those who cannot defend themselves. Liam and Sophie, through months of specialized therapy, began the long journey of healing and learned that asking for help is not weakness, but strength. And the local community received a brutal reminder that luxurious facades and charity galas can hide terrible monstrosities happening behind locked doors. The impact of the case extended far beyond the Davies family. Richard established the Helen Davies Foundation for Child Protection, endowed with an initial $5 million dedicated specifically to combating domestic abuse in high-income families where victims are often not taken seriously. The foundation trained domestic professionals, housekeepers, nannies, drivers on how to identify and report abuse safely, offering legal and financial protection for whistleblowers. Local laws were strengthened, requiring that abuse allegations in wealthy families be investigated with the same rigor as in poor families. 3 other children from elite families were rescued from similar situations in the following months, encouraged by Liam and Sophie's story. Veronica Monroe was sentenced to 15 years in prison for aggravated child abuse and 25 years for the first-degree murder of Helen, sentences to be served consecutively, 40 years in total, with no possibility of parole for the first 20. The judge, in delivering the sentence, said, "You used a position of trust and authority to torture innocent children and murder a defenseless woman. You manipulated systems that should protect the vulnerable. This society needs time away from people like you." Veronica, who had always controlled everything through appearances and manipulation, discovered that in the prison system, neither beauty nor a silver tongue offered any protection. She would have 40 years, more than enough time, to reflect on how she destroyed everything for greed, power, and pure evil. The following Christmas in 2025 was completely different at the Davies mansion. There was no extravagant party with the city's elite, no professional decorators or $1,000 floral arrangements. Liam, now 9 and visibly healthier, and Sophie, now 7 and finally smiling again, decorated a Christmas tree with their father and with Grandma Maria, a title the children insisted on giving the woman who saved them, which Maria accepted with tears of joy. The dinner was simple: roast turkey that Richard himself learned to make, rice pilaf, stuffing, and bread pudding for dessert. It was far from the sophistication of the previous year, but it was filled with something that had been completely absent from that lavish party: true love, genuine laughter, safety, a real family. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't had the courage, Maria," Richard said, as they all sat down at the table that Christmas night. Liam and Sophie, seated on either side of Maria, held her hands. "I would have lost my children. One way or another, Veronica would have succeeded in destroying them or pushing me completely away from them." He wiped his teary eyes. "You saved us. You saved this family." Maria shook her head, squeezing the small hands that held hers. "It wasn't just me, Mr. Davies. It was the love that Mrs. Helen planted in this house, which was still alive even after she was gone. It was the strength of Liam and Sophie who survived the worst and kept protecting each other. It was you who finally opened your eyes and chose your children. It was many people. And you, watching this story right now, have you ever seen injustice happening near you? Have you witnessed someone vulnerable being mistreated and needing help? Did you have the courage to act like Maria, to risk your comfort zone to do what was right? Or did you let it pass thinking, it's none of my business or I don't want to get involved? Tell us your story in the comments if you've ever faced a similar situation, how you acted, what you would do differently. Because sometimes a cell phone, courage, and a refusal to stay silent are worth more than 1,000 convenient excuses. Maria was just a housekeeper, with no power, no connections, no resources beyond an old cell phone and a determined heart. But she changed everything. She saved 2 lives. She brought justice for a murder that would have remained unpunished forever. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories that restore our faith in humanity, that show that ordinary people can make an extraordinary difference, that prove that courage doesn't need a diploma or a bank account, just the conviction that some things are non-negotiable, like a child's safety. Leave a like if this story touched you, if it made you think, if it inspired you not to stay silent when you witness injustice. And remember, this Christmas and every other, the greatest gift we can give doesn't come wrapped in shiny paper with a ribbon. It comes from having the courage to act when we witness wrong, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, to be the voice for those who have been silenced. Merry Christmas, and may you never lose the courage to do what is right.